Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hey, I hope you guys are doing well. Staying safe and healthy. Hey, thanks you guys for coming to our second meeting of the book club. I got a few things just to get off the table before we start. I think next month, due to it being finals, Christmas break, I think we're gonna cancel the meeting. That way, it'll give us time to work on it from the technical side, and then give students a chance to just relax with their families, get a break from school. Another thing is our wonderful librarians have put together a library resource guide. I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see it. Can you guys see the guide? Yeah, thanks Suzanne and Sheila for you guys did a great job. I'll post the link onto the chat as well, so you guys can pull it up. See where's the chat. So, student government purchased these books over here. They're available in the library. I don't know what the policies are from the library with the pandemic happening, but if you guys get a chance, please, check these books out. So, because we'll be basing our discussions on the books that, are on this guide. And I think that's all I really have to discuss from housekeeping standpoint. If you guys have any comments about that, let me know. Otherwise, I'll pass it on to Carlisha and we can get started.
No questions. Okay, hi everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Carlisha. I am the Vice President of the Black Student Union. Thank you all for coming today. I do appreciate it. Last time we had a really good turnout. It was a very good event, and I hope this time we can keep the same energy, have a good discussion and everything. So we do have a link for people to fill out. I believe it's on the Student Gov website. If you wanted to be a presenter, if you wanted to speak during book club and talk about the book that you were presenting. But we haven't had anyone fill anything out. So if we have any volunteers that would like to talk about a book or an article or anything that they've read or a documentary that they've watched, or if you've started reading the books that are in the LTU library, how is that going? Anyone have any updates or anything?
Could you post that form in the chat? It may have been here before I joined, but I'd be happy to fill it out and sign up for an event in the spring. If faculty are invited, if that's okay, if faculty.
Yeah, that's no problem.
I'll send that link over right now. Let me know if it works.
Got it, perfect.
So this is the floor is open for anyone to speak if you've read anything that you want to talk about. Nothing. Okay, so then I have questions in regards to any book that you've read recently or any article that you've read or just in general. My first question would be like, what's one of your favorite quotes from a book that you've read recently?
Guys, I'll comment on that question from Carlisha. So over summer, I read Malcolm X's autobiography. I think it was really well written. The guy's very interesting about the way he thinks about life, about the way he thinks about everything. And one of the things that stood out to me about his transition is when he took the pilgrimage to Mecca, you know, to become like really part of the Nation of Islam. And his in a way, it's just like he was approached by other countries, like people in other countries, is like they approached him as a regular person. You know, in America, you know, we're going through a tough time and people are looking at him differently. But when he goes overseas, you know, he's just a normal person. So that really like opened his eyes to other cultures and how, you know, America is just so like I don't know the term for it, but you know, like when horses have those things covering their eyes so they can only see one direction. It's like he basically described, you know, that's how America is versus other people around the world. So that really stood out to me.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else have any comments or anything they would like to say off of that?
So I know this quote from Malcolm X, and I just looked it up to make sure too. But it's one of my favorite quotes, probably of all time. It's, "You don't have to be a man to fight for freedom. All you have to do is to be an intelligent human being." I feel like that just, I guess, during the times that he was a part of, I guess that just kind of, it really does put things into perspective for like anyone who has the intelligence or education knows that it's the right thing, obviously, to fight for freedom. And it just, I don't know, it kind of speaks to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot my mic was on.
Did you want to say something? You can speak.
I don't necessarily have a favorite quote, but well, it's the golden rule. It's a rule. It's the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that resonates with me more and more as I'm reading Dying of Whiteness. That and Dying of Whiteness is one of the books that was on the book list, but it focuses on how this doctor interviewed these groups of people in Missouri and Kansas and Tennessee. Most of them were white, and he was trying to figure out why were they opposed to policies that would have helped them as well as all people. And I don't understand that mentality where you just hate someone just because of who they are. And that's why I was reading the book to try to get a handle on why do they hate the other so much that they would jeopardize their own well-being. And so I just think a lot of things would be solved if people would treat people like you would want to be treated. That would solve us. So that's what, when you talked about a quote, that's what came to mind, because that rule keeps resonating with me as I'm trying to read the book, and it's taken me a long time to read it because it's very painful to read how people thoroughly dislike people of color.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's a question that I always had, like, how did this racism even like become a thing? Like, why are Black people or people of color so hated? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Where did it all start? So Dying of Whiteness is a good read. I really should start reading that. And like Daniel said, this is in the LTU library, so it's accessible for LTU students. Does anyone else have anything? For the people that are just hopping on, thank you for joining us. The question I just asked was, I I gave the option for people to talk about any books that they've just read, recently read, or to answer the question, which was like, what's a quote from a book that you've recently read that stood out to you? So if you guys wanted to answer that.
I have a quick one. It's actually from the Diary of Anne Frank. So it's been a while since I read it, but I remember this quote is how wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. And I think that's something that I think a lot of people need to understand, especially at a younger age, because everyone thinks that they have to wait until, you know, they become somebody successful, they become, you know, somebody known before they can start to change the world. And I think, you know, just doing a good thing every day can help change the world. You know, you start with your own small circle and then you build off from there. So.
Right, like change really does start at home. Change starts with us. And once we change, then we can convince our neighbor to change. Like it all starts with us. So that's very important. Thank you for saying that. Alexis, did you have something you want to add?
Oh yes. Hi everyone. I just finished reading Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. It's all about vulnerability and taking the opportunity to hold yourself accountable for how you carry yourself throughout life. I think it ties in a lot of what's going on this like during this time, because like a lot of us don't want to acknowledge how we feel or the emotions that we have, that you know we see the news and the media, and this book kind of helped me step back and kind of reframe everything that was going on, just look at the big picture and say, you know, it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to go out and explain myself to other people, especially being a Black woman in America. I mean, we all get discouraged sometimes to stand up for what we feel is right, but this book just reassured me that it's important to be vulnerable. It's important to understand your emotions are not good or bad. They're just emotions that we all as humans feel and need to acknowledge on a day-to-day basis in order to be better people. She has a good TED Talk that kind of wraps the whole book up. So you guys should definitely look her up. Her name is Brene Brown.
If you don't mind, can you type the title and the author into the chat?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Go next. Book I'm currently reading is called The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Blank. How to Stop Spending Time You Don't Have with People You Don't Like Doing Things You Don't Want to Do is by Sarah Knight. So I got this book because there's another book called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, and that one wasn't available. So I got this. So the other book is like learning how to cleanse your space and cleanse your energy, and it'll really help you clear your mind and be more productive. And this book is like applying that to relationships with people. So instead of, I'm one of those people that likes to take on everything. I'm just like, I'll do it before I ask somebody for some help. So that's why I got this book, to let me know that it's okay to actually lean on other people and trust them to do things, because I physically and emotionally and mentally cannot do everything. So I feel like this book is a great, easy read, and it's just telling you ways on how you can just change the dynamics of your relationships with people to know what you should be giving your time to and what you shouldn't be giving your time to reach your end goals. So I will take this book in the chat because I think I got this for like $6 on thriftbooks.com. That's a great place to get used books if you're really into reading. You don't want to spend a lot of money on books because brand new books can be very pricey. I think I got this for like $6. And I'll type the name of it in the chat. This is a good read.
Thank you for sharing. So I actually have a comment on Alexis's book. How you said that it gets exhausting, like you don't want to have to explain, you have to be vulnerable sometimes in certain situations. I actually recently saw a video. A lady was wearing a Breonna Taylor mask to work, and people were asking her, like, are you Breonna Taylor? Like, just blatantly. And she said that it was like kind of, it hurt her feelings. And it's draining to have to explain to them, like, I am not physically Breonna Taylor, but that could have been me, like a Black woman that was sleeping in her own house and was killed by the police department and never received justice. Like, I am not her, but it could have been me. So it does get draining having to explain that, but we do have to remain like patient and vulnerable, and like it's very helpful when we do have allies of people of non-color, like that we have allies that aren't helping us and that understand the things that we go through and that are listening to us when we say Black Lives Matter. So I just wanted to say that and throw that out there. If anyone else had any comments.
Can I add on to that?
Yeah.
I think what you said is like so important. And that's kind of what led me to read the book, because I got the book so long ago, but that's what led me to read the book and to understand that just as everyone is having an experience in this world, just like they will never understand the experience as it is to be a Black woman. If you're not a Black woman, you don't know that experience. And white allies have white privilege. That's something that we will never understand because it's something that we will never experience. But if you take the time to be vulnerable and listen to each other and explain your experience, you open up the world to so much more knowledge. Because a lot of hate comes from just ignorance. How many times have we all just shut down and like, I don't want to deal with this, I don't want to open up, this is too much to handle. And it's like, if you just take the time to be vulnerable, put yourself out there, your true self, and explain what it is and how it makes you feel, and listen to how other people are feeling in that same exact experience, we gain so much from each other.
Actually, can I share something on that point?
Mhm.
I don't have a quote, but this is something I've been reading. So this is going back a little bit, but I was struck by the fact that the first couple quotes were from Malcolm X, and then Sheila brought up the Golden Rule, and then Hadi brought up Anne Frank, because I'm reading this book called The Black Theology of Liberation by this guy named James Cone. It was actually written in the 1970s, but James Cone was a really important thinker in kind of articulating, trying to connect what was happening in the 60s with the civil rights movement, and especially like the Black Power movement, to religious language. And I bring that up because I think that lately, especially in the last couple months, I've been really bothered by the fact that in our political discourse, there's been a lot of claims about religious freedom, especially with the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, and this idea of like having protecting religious freedom. And what that often translates into is like white religious freedom, like a certain kind of like white version of what religion means. And what bothers me there is that communities of color in this country are really profoundly religious in a lot of ways, if you look at it statistically, and their religious voices get left off the kind of political conversation, or they're not often included in that. So there's this kind of weird way in which religion in the United States in public life tends to mean white religion. And so I'm reading James Cone because I want to hear other voices that are like trying to change that. And what's intense is that he was trying to change that conversation in the 1970s, right? Like this is decades of that. And he says stuff that's totally relevant for today too. But yeah, that's another, if you're interested in these kind of questions of religion and how religion gets sort of translated into public life, I could put his name in the chat too. But I think the vulnerability there is like, as someone who was raised in a religious home, being vulnerable to say maybe the religion I grew up with was complicit with white supremacy, even if nobody in my family or home or in my community was overtly racist, right? But maybe some of even the ways they talk about their religion was, complicit with these kinds of things. And that's hard work to kind of like acknowledge that and parse out, because religious beliefs are some of the most intimate things that people hold. They're the things that they they're kind of like some of their moral centers. So anyway, I don't know how relevant that is, but that's something I've been reading over the last couple of months, very, very slowly, but it's been informative.
Thank you for sharing that. And did you drop that in the chat?
I'm doing it right now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
But Paul, I think that's a great point. Like, honestly, because it's like we never know. So for you to pick that up and to share that with others, it's important because we all learn from your experience. We all can't experience the same. We all can't experience everyone's life and get, points from everybody. So it's nice to know that there are people out there who acknowledge that their situation was different from our situation and how their situation could have impacted my situation. That's important.
Yes, I agree. Thank you everyone who responded and shared to that question. If there's anyone else that wanted to speak on their favorite quote or a quote that stands out to them and anything that they've been reading, or want to just talk about anything that they've been reading, now is your chance.
Well, I have another one. I'm just full of books.
Okay. We love it. We love it. This is the perfect place for it.
But I'm just really excited about this one book. It's about W.E.B. Du Bois. And when I read Souls of Black Folks, I really wasn't impressed with him because I felt that he was only concerned about the elite Black people. He was not concerned about the working class. And even though I still feel that way, he did a lot of work in trying to change the stereotypes that were pervasive in America concerning Black people. And so I was doing some other research and I came across his infographics. And I studied graphic design at Lawrence Tech. And maybe that's when I came across him, but I didn't have time to really explore the graphic design at W.E.B. Du Bois graphic designs at that time. However, a book just came out explaining his infographics, and it's called W.E.B. Du Bois Data Portraits: Visualizing Black America. And it's exciting because they made the case that you can change people's minds by showing visual representations of what's going on. And I said, well, what I was supposed to get out of graphic design? It didn't hit me at the time, but now just reading his book and seeing and going through and having those visuals explained to me has made a big difference in how I view Du Bois and his work for African Americans. Also, I found out that he wrote science fiction. And so that's why I was really interested. Now I'm really interested in science fiction because of Du Bois, because if you can't envision it, then how are you going to change something? You have to be able to make your vision. You have to put your vision out there for other people to get on board. And one of the easier ways of doing it is to have a graphic, because even back in the 20s, and even today, people don't want to see a lot of verbiage. Just tell me what it is so that I can make sense of it. So I'm really excited about that book. So I'll type it in because I want to share that book.
Thank you. That book does sound really interesting. I'm definitely a graphical person as well. Like, I like to see and understand everything. So that's something that I would be interested in. So my next question would be like, okay, so think back to the most recent book you've read or the most recent documentary you read regarding like Black people or Black culture. And I want to know, what do you think the author's purpose was in writing this book or creating this documentary?
Well, I can answer that one too. And I don't mean to monopolize it, but I had just been on this quest of reading all of these books, and I'll find the exact title. But Stacy Abrams, who ran for Georgia governor, and I can't tell you the year, but anyway, she ran for Georgia governor, and she lost the election because they alleged that the Secretary of State at that time suppressed the African American vote. And so she writes this book about leadership, and this book was really cheap. So I decided, well, I'll read this. It's about the fact that she talks about how you can lead from outside the political arena. You don't have to run for office, but there are certain ways that you can lead. And so she goes through that. And one of the organizations that she founded was Fair Fight Action. And she was responsible for getting out the Georgia vote for the presidential election. So her methods worked. So I thought that was really interesting too. I'll type that in a minute, but I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to be quiet.
You don't have to be quiet. We really love the information, honestly. But I was going to say the last book that I read is Not a Crime to Be Poor. And it's right here, Peter Eltman. Now, this was actually, my professor told me to read this like maybe sophomore year. Did not get around to reading it until a year post-graduation. So life gets crazy. But this book talks about people of color and how they're marginalized, not only by their ethnicity or their culture, but also by like classism and economic status. And I think the purpose of this book is to make you understand that it is a bigger system sometimes. Well, yeah, it's a bigger system than just race. There are people who are marginalized, who are not people of color, and how much more powerful we all could be if we work together. If we understood that it's bigger than race, it's about supporting someone because they are human, because we all deserve what is right. I'm a child of God. I don't know if everybody wants to be claim that, but we are all here. We're all humans. We all deserve rights. And I think this book is like one of the best books I've ever read to actually make me realize like it's not just me that's struggling. There are people of every race who are struggling, who have their own issues that they have to face and overcome. And with that being said, let's look at the ways that we are more similar than we are different. Let's look at how we're all struggling with healthcare, or how we're all struggling with whatever issue we want to focus on. And let's move forward that way instead of looking at, oh, okay, you're Black, you're white, you're Indian, we don't have to, those things are important, don't get me wrong. They add value to this world, but they don't have to separate us. They can encourage us to look at other things that make us similar. So definitely a great read, very easy read. I know I said my professor had it for class, but very easy read, very good book, and very cheap.
What's the name of it?
It's called Not a Crime to Be Poor. I lost the cover, but I'll put it in the chat too.
Alexis, what class was that assigned for, if you don't mind my asking?
Now, this was so long ago. I was urban and regional studies, so I'm pretty sure I can look back. I can look it up. But it was so long ago. I really don't even remember. It was.
So
I
that was,
remember the professor, but I don't remember the class.
it wasn't a class offered at Lawrence Tech. That's if you
Oh
were
no,
okay. No, I was just curious about that. Yeah.
no. I went to University of Michigan Dearborn, so I'm just dropping in because I like this. This setting is very nice.
Piggybacking on what Alexis was talking about, I'm also reading Waste, a one woman's fight against America's dirty secret, and it's by Catherine Coleman Flowers. And it's about the fact that there are some people, and it's not just a few, who are living in Alabama and they don't have sewer systems and they're using a septic tank, and the septic tanks have not been working properly. So the waste has been in their backyards. And Alabama at one point was trying to criminalize the fact that they weren't fixing the septic tanks. This Miss Flowers also won a MacArthur Genius Award recently for this book, and it's a short read. It's only 200 pages, but it's like so depressing to know that in 21st century America, you don't have. There are some areas in the U.S. that don't have um, functioning sewer systems, and people are having to put up with really living in their own filth. So if we would all just do the right thing, there's a quote that people used to all say all the time. If you would just do the right thing, they wouldn't have to live like that. And she's bringing this to the forefront. So you see, I cannot be quiet when it comes to books, so forgive me.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Does anyone else have something they want to say? I actually have a comment. Actually, I just lost it. Does anyone else have anything they want to say? Anything?
I'll make a quick plug for a video about a book. I'm going to drop it in the chat. So this video was from a talk that I saw recently. One of the pluses of COVID is that you get these really great lectures that are being broadcasted for free online. And in the past, they would have been, at a specific place. So this is a conversation that I watched it about a week or two ago between Claudia Rankin and Judith Butler. And Judith Butler is one of kind of like a pretty famous literary critic. They've been working for the last 30 years in literary criticism. And then Claudia Rankin's a poet, and she's written a number of books specifically addressing race. Probably her most important was this book called Citizen, an American Lyric. It came out, I think, in 2016. And she just published a new book. But she also does these like video poems with her husband, who's a filmmaker. And in the conversation, they do this really powerful, they show one of her video poems, which is kind of like an exploration of white female identity through clips from the woman in the Central Park who accused the black man who called the cops on the black man who asked her to tie up her dog when she was letting her dog off the leash in a place where they were not allowed to be off the leash. And so they take that footage and sort of like Rankin writes this poem and they mix it into this kind of video essay. But it's a really, the conversation here reminded me of the conversation they were having about kind of like identity and like recognizing the other and race and gender. So I'm plugging that as like a kind of a cool video to watch that'll also point you to two really great writers in their own right. So I decided to throw that in there. It's still book related, Sheila. So it's not and I've read Rankin's books, but I haven't read them in a while, but I was excited to actually see her talk a little bit in person. So check it out if you're interested.
Thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else have any comments? I remembered what I was going to say, so I'm going to say it before I forget again. I had a comment on Alexis's book, Not a Crime to Be Poor. It made me think about a video that I saw. I actually saw it this morning, and it was a news clip. It was from the news, and basically there was an interracial couple. A Black lady was married to a white man, and they had a son together, and they were trying to get their house appraised. They wanted to sell it, see how much it's worth and everything. Well, with the house, they had their pictures of, their family and everything in there. And basically the house got appraised for like less than what they bought the house for. So she took down all of the pictures in her house that she was in and made it look as if it was just a white family living there. And the appraisal came back, they got another appraisal, and it came back as almost double the amount that they were previously appraised for. So that book really made me think about that. It makes me wonder, like, how can we even change this system to where, like, why is it that when a Black person lives in a neighborhood, it brings down the property value? How can we go about changing that? So that's my question. I would want to find out. I guess I need to find a book that could answer that, or if anyone else has something to say, but that's what I was saying.
I got the book for you, Kalisha. If you read The Color of Law, it talks about all the systematic racism in our country, like the housing development. There'll be parts in it. It was like one thing that blew my mind is like, the government set out rules that, Black people could not live in certain neighborhoods, but real estate agents, they would, find loopholes to where they could sell houses to Black people for like 2 to 3 times more than white people. So they would kick white people out of the neighborhoods to make more money and have Black people move in because they could make 2 to 3 times more money. And the government would get these realtors in trouble for that, and like would not let them sell houses to Black people. So even if like a Black person wanted to live in a neighborhood and they were ready to pay double or triple, like the government will not allow it either. So if you read that book, it's a lot of powerful information.
Thank you. I wrote it down, so I'll be reading it.
And if you don't want to read a book, and because I've read The Color of Law, and it goes into a lot of detail, but a shorter read is by Ta-Nehisi Coates. He wrote about housing discrimination in Atlantic Magazine, and I don't have that quote offhand, but I can look that up and bring it the next time we have a meeting. But he talks about the housing and the impact that it's had. So he writes in a more readable vein than I think the author of The Color of Law. I think Ta-Nehisi Coates just talks like we're speaking, which doesn't always translate well for writing, but I think he does an excellent job. He's also a MacArthur Genius Award winner. So I mentioned that again because quite a few Blacks have won the MacArthur Genius Award lately. And it's been around for a while. And it's prestigious because it changes lives. Octavia Butler won, who's a science fiction writer. She won it. And I don't know if it was $625,000 when she won, but when she won, it was enough to change her life and give her the opportunity to continue writing. So that's why I bring that up, that we do win those awards. And if you win one of those awards, it's transformative on a lot of different levels.
Thank you for sharing that. And can you put that into the chat as well when you get a chance? So does anyone else have Any comments? If the question was, if you missed the question, it was in the most recent book or documentary you read, what do you believe that the author's purpose was in writing this book or creating this documentary or movie? If anyone else wants to comment on that.
Well, I just watched, I guess you guys don't think I do anything but just read, which on some levels that's true. But I just watched this documentary called Radium, and it's about the Radium Girls. And they worked in a watch factory during the 20s. And I bring it up because, you know, we always think that a lot of things happen to Black people, but a lot of things happen to white people too, because of government policy and how people don't care about other people. But the Radium was about these girls working in the radium, uh, a watch factory, and they had to paint the dials on the clock, you know, put the numbers on the watches, and they used radium so that the servicemen would be able to see their watches and in the nighttime. And they had clocks like that as well. But radium is poisonous. And the company knew that it was poisonous. And so it reminds me that it doesn't matter what race you are. If people don't care about each other, then bad things can always happen. So that's the latest documentary that I saw.
And that really ties into the book that I read, not a crime to be poor, because it's more so staying like it's more so about in America, it's more so about socioeconomic status rather than any other thing. Like every other thing is basically like he paints it to be every other thing is just a distraction and or an add-on to your struggle. But the baseline of why we are all suffering or don't have the rights that we deserve is based off socioeconomic status in America and classism. So
Well, and those two things are like really complicatedly related, right? So just to give you one example from our own local history, you know, when the Great Migration happened and you have a lot of Black folks moving from the South to the northern cities, that created a situation for someone like Henry Ford to say, let's make sure that we keep Black work laborers and white laborers kind of pitted against one another, because if they recognize their common class identity, we'd be in big trouble because the unions would be a lot more powerful then, right? So there was this deliberate deployment of race to keep working class people from recognizing the fact that they were connected to one another. Now you can only do that if you already have a history of racism that makes it easy to gin up white people against Black folks, right? And so that's, I think, that's just one chapter of how I think it's really crucial to like be analyzing those two in conjunction with one another. But yeah, I'm with you, Alexis. I think we can't leave class out of this point. And Sheila's point earlier about Du Bois, like I really admire, I think Du Bois is one of the most important Black intellectuals America's ever produced, but he also, you know, deliberately took this position that race question would be addressed if you sought out and tried to like promote what he called the talented 10th, right? Like the talented 10th. And I think that approach, you know, reinscribes social class hierarchies and doesn't look at sort of the broader class relations that underlie a lot of these things.
Absolutely. That's why I was like, I didn't want to have anything to do with Du Bois once I realized that he was only concerned about the talented 10. And, you know, I get it. You know, he had done everything he was supposed to do. So he felt like all of the privileges of being that were given to whites should be given to him or his class, because he had done what he was supposed to do. He had gotten educated, he contributed all these things, and yet he was still discriminated against.
And I think his thinking evolved. Like I've only read bits of The Souls of the Black Folk and a few of his other things. So I don't think he stayed there, but yeah, that was like the bent of his early work. So yeah.
I don't know.
I-
I think if we were in the same room, if he and I were in the same room, it would still be a matter. Well, what did your father do? What did your mother do? Where did you guys live? It wouldn't be about the fact that I've achieved this and that. It's all the other stuff.
yeah, and that attitude permeates a lot of people's consciousness for sure.
Yeah, actually, oh, does someone, oh, go ahead.
So, I mean, that also goes in line with the whole thinking of trickle-down economics in the U.S., which has never worked. And it reminds me of like a quote from years ago that talks about how, you know, you have a dozen cookies on a plate, and the CEO takes 11 of the cookies and then makes all the employees fight over the last cookie, you know, by pitting them against each other. And I think that's one of the biggest problems here, especially in the U.S., is that, you know, instead of, you know, as Alexis was saying, coming together, you know, from all different backgrounds and actually fighting the real problems, you know, we're always pitted against each other, like, oh, these are the people that are the problem, these are the people that are problem, and we never get ahead because we're always busy fighting each other instead of coming together. So I think it's definitely important to, you know, reevaluate that thinking and come together, because, you know, there's a lot of really big problems in the U.S., and, you know, only coming together is what's going to help fix those problems.
Thank you. Very well said. That actually makes me think of an article I just had to read for a class. It was basically talking about like immigrants in the workforce. And it made me just think about like how a lot of people think that immigrants are taking away the jobs from Americans, but in this specific article, they were talking about how the immigrants are, some people do the jobs that normal Americans would not do, the more risky jobs that we don't want to do. The immigrants come in and they do it, and they may even do it for cheaper. A lot of the times they do it for lower wages. So that just made me think about that. I don't remember. I just lost my train of thought just that fast. I swear, it's terrible. But that made me think about that. And yes, anybody have
Well,
anything?
I mean, to add on to that as well, we always get told, like, you know, the immigrants are coming for your jobs, they're coming for your jobs, all that kind of stuff. And the thing is, you know, it's not even just those jobs that, you know, Americans won't do. It's the fact that our education system here in the U.S. is not training people for the jobs that are here. That's why we have to, you know, bring people from other countries to come do the jobs, you know, even in bigger companies, because we don't have any trained workforce here to do them. So, I mean, yes, they're coming to take the jobs that are here, but they're not doing it just because, you know, they can get them here. It's because we're not trained for them. And I think that's another big problem here in the U.S. is the education system. And, you know, like when it comes from the political side of things, you know, each side talks about fixing the education system, but they're never going to do it, because the more educated the population is, the less they're going to keep the same people in office. So even though both sides say, you know, claim that they're doing something for education, you know, education in this country has gotten worse and worse every year, you know, regardless of which political party has been in office. And I think that's one of the bigger problems that, you know, we need to come together and fix, because from a young age to college, our education is getting worse and worse. So
It's getting worse and worse and more expensive. And tuition is literally going up almost each semester or each year. So it's all systematic too, because we know that like college is hard to afford. There will be a lot more people in college, a lot more people with degrees, a lot of more doctors and lawyers if college was free, if college was affordable for everyone. So it's all systematic. And we just have to change it. And I don't even know how, like, make college free. I feel like that's the first step, or make it more affordable. But like you said, they don't, you can go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, girls, but I'll speak to that because I've been in this business for a while now, and as a faculty member, I'm profoundly concerned with the cost of college, and I wanted to know, why is this happening, right? Like, what's causing this to happen? And there are a lot of factors. There's no single factor, but the biggest factor that I think speaks to these broader issues, and this goes back to Sheila's point about the places in Arkansas or Alabama where they don't have plumbing, is massive disinvestment from public goods, right? So think of it this way, and I saw hard numbers on this about 15 years ago when I first looked into this. I can probably dig them out if I wanted to, but just to take one state, the state of Pennsylvania, where I was from, in the late 1980s and early 1990s, the state subsidized 70% of the average student's cost of their college education. So if you went to school at Penn State, for example, for every $10,000 of total cost for your education, the state directly subsidized $7,000 and you paid $3,000. Okay. By the early 2000s, that ratio was exactly inverted. So the state was subsidizing $3,000 and you were paying $7,000. So if you think about that single factor alone, now that's public schools, not private schools, but the public schools set the market, right? They're the ones that, if public school tuition is going up, then it's easier for LTU to justify private school tuition going up because they no longer have to compete with public schools that are charging less and less. So I think this is the same. I mean, this is just me talking, but if you look at our roads, you look at the fact that you guys didn't have electricity for the first couple of days this week. If you look at our healthcare system, if you look at our education system, all of these things are things that we've been told, let's give less and less money to these things, and they somehow magically will become better and better. And they simply haven't. And so that's I think the problem, and this goes to Hadi's point about the politics of it, we have so many of these things failing right now, so many things that aren't working for so many people, that it's hard to get any kind of political will to fix any one of them. Because if you're paying out the wazoo for healthcare and you don't have kids in college, it's hard for you to get excited about getting college free, right? Whereas if you're a college student, you're healthy, it's hard for you to get excited about reforming healthcare. So, but I agree, we have to see it as a systematic failure to invest in public goods, of which education is one, of which healthcare is one, of which an environment is one. And until we get out of that, I think it's just going to keep getting worse before it gets getting better. But I would say if there's one single cause, if you look closely, that does seem to be it, right? Because I can tell you too, professors aren't making more money, right? It's like faculty salaries are not really all that much higher, even in adjusted for inflation now, than they were in the 1970s. So it's not those kinds of things that are driving up the costs. So there are other things, don't get me wrong, like the dorms that I lived in, you guys wouldn't step foot in 20 years ago, right? Like there's some things to change, and that's okay. I get that. But you got to be looking for these larger disinvestment patterns, and you'll start seeing a little bit of clarity, I think.
Yeah, and to add on to that as well, I mean, that's like especially right now with Black Lives Matter movement and stuff like that, when people talk about defunding the police, and everyone always acts like if we defund the police, that means we want to take the police away. And the thing is, we've been defunding education for I don't know how many years now, and education is still around, and the fact of the matter, I think people sometimes want to take words to be the literal meaning of it, instead of actually understanding what what's actually being asked for. So I think that's always something that kind of hurts the conversation. Like, nobody actually wants to understand what is being said. They just want to hear what they want to hear. And in regards to education, I mean, education is tied to every single thing that we deal with in life, whether it's, roads, healthcare, public systems, private systems, everything. Education is tied into everything. So I think out of all things that need to be focused on, especially from a political point of view, is education. But again, like I said before, our current political leaders will not want that, because then we won't keep the same people in office, which is what they're all afraid of, whether it's Democrats, Republicans, regardless of which party it is, they're all afraid of losing power. So the less educated the populace is, the more they're guaranteed they'll stay in office. I think that's why, as a society, we need to start, the president, all that stuff is important, but if we don't focus on our local leaders and build off from there, we're never going to change the system at the top. So I think electing more and more state officials, more, county officials, things like that, which more directly, affect our day-to-day lives, and then focus on the higher offices, then we will actually bring the change that we want to bring. Because we've seen, like right now with the presidential election, like, yes, some states flipped, but it was by a very small margin. And that was because local leaders, went door to door and brought everyone out to vote. And we've seen how much that could change the election. I mean, this was the, highest number of voters in a presidential election in the history. I mean, both Biden and Trump got the highest number of votes that's ever been in history. So that just shows you that local action is what's important, and building off from there.
I just want to say I have been screaming at, like, I learned that maybe sophomore year, but yes, that is like the key to success, and like that is the key to making the change that we want to see. And it kind of reminds me of like trickle down economics. We cannot expect trickle down politics to save us. Yes, the presidential election was important, but there are local elections that are way more effective. Like, for example, I remember DPS, their whole board was up for re-election because of some scandal, maybe like 5 or 7 years ago, but no one saw the importance of that. But it is important because these are the people who pick the curriculum for our children. These are the people who affect what will be going into the school system, and that affects children's future, hands down. So absolutely, I think that is like the biggest thing to stress whenever I get into a serious conversation with anyone. That is definitely like my go-to thing. Like, you have to be aware of who your local government is, because they are the ones that are responsible for day-to-day life. Those are the people who will allow you to make a change that is current, like that's going to happen, that you're going to see that change. That's like almost, I hate to say it, but it could be an immediate change. It doesn't have to be a long, drawn out change. It could be an immediate change. We just have to be aware. We have to be knowledgeable of what's going on with local government. So definitely continue to preach that message to everyone.
And I agree with you. But I also want to put this on the table that you have to be willing to serve as a local official. And how many of you are going to school to serve as a local official? Because that's not the glory that people are looking for. That's not the payday that they're looking for. But you're absolutely right that you need to serve on your local city council, but you're not making any money, and you have to think about, do you want to do that?
I have this conversation all the time with my mentor because he's the district manager for District 4 in Detroit, and he's constantly on my head about this, about like, what are you gonna do? Like, you can't just be educated and not hold a role. But I'm finally caving in because I understand that some things you just have to sacrifice. It's about the greater good. It's just you have to understand that everybody's not going to be able to make millions in this lifetime. Even though it sounds good and I want to vote for my 30th birthday, like those are things that I want, but there are things that our country needs. There are things that, like, I want my son to be able to have in the future when he's of age. So I have to sacrifice. So you're very right. And continue to call me on that, because I did go to school for urban politics. So I do have to be responsible and like you said, hold those positions, because we can't keep giving them to people they're not our age. I'm sorry, guys. They're not our age. They're not people who are facing or looking at things the way we look at things. There are people who have a different outlook on life because they experienced a different time of life, not the current life that we live. So
I
we
don't
do
think
as
that
younger
age
people
has
have to.
anything to do with it. No, I'm
No,
not.
not just age. You're right, not just age. I don't mean to be offensive, but
Okay.
just people who are, I mean, when I say speak of age, I'm thinking of people who are more so like old mind, like they don't change with the time, they don't keep themselves updated, they don't feel the need to invest in or understand what's currently going on. I don't really, I should explain that. I don't really look at age and be like, oh, that's a older person, they're probably going to be stale and not open-minded. But to the people who are not open-minded or stuck in their ways or the time that they come from, we kind of have to phase them out if they're not open and willing to, you know, adjust to new times and new things that we need.
But I also want to point out that being in local politics is not easy either, because things don't move as fast as you think that they move, or that you would like for them to move. But I think it does make you want to be engaged in your community and to stay focused on what's going on in your community. So, and is it Hadi? Um, Comments about education. I'll just say this, that yes, our education has been gradually defunded, but I also feel as though parents have not stepped up to the plate and done their part to make sure that their child is educated. And you can really see it with online education and with COVID. I see it every day that students, um, little kids like first graders, there's no adult sitting there with them to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. You're going to have a lost generation with COVID-19 if parents don't step up to the plate and do what they need to do and demand more of their education for their kids. And one other point, and I'll be quiet. Farmington Hills, they now no longer have a superintendent. Their superintendent resigned. So who's leading that district? You know, board members have resigned. So who's leading that district? Parents should be out in the street, but that's not happening. And so I think parents have to step up and really be on everybody's case to make sure um, their children are being educated.
And thank you for all that, Sheila. Guys, I think this was a great meeting. And thank you all for coming. I think every week, I think it's better than last week. So last week was a great discussion. I think this week has been a better discussion. So hopefully going forward, you know, you guys keep coming. We keep working on it. Yeah, like I said, next month, we're gonna cancel the meeting. So the meeting will be, third meeting will be January 27th, 2021. Oh, look at that, we're almost done 2020. So fingers crossed things get better. But you know, it doesn't mean that we should just stop all next month. I'll keep sending stuff out, information. If you guys find stuff, maybe we can set up like a chat and stay in contact. But you know, again, thank you for coming and making this work. We've all worked really hard, and it means a lot seeing this input from everyone and a great discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for speaking. I appreciate you all. Have a good one.
You too.
Happy holidays.
You
Be
too.
safe.
Happy holidays. Be safe.
Hey, Daniel.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, Heidi.
Bye.
Do you get a copy of all the chat once this is over, since you're the host?
Yep, we got a copy of all of it.
All right. Are we gonna have like a list of all the books that people suggested?
Yeah, that's going to be on that library guide. I think, with this month off, I'm going to spend some time working with Sheila and Suzanne on getting this library guide like nice and pretty and organized, and everything that's discussed in our meetings will be on it. So,
Okay.
yeah, because there's some good stuff on it. Yeah, there's a lot of good.
Yeah, I was trying to get them all down as like they're coming through, but I'm like, I have already like way too many tabs open. So.
Yeah, we'll have it. Don't worry.
All right. Thank you.
I also have the ones from the last meeting. I don't know if you guys kept them too, but I do have those too.
We catch them, and I keep the recordings because I like to go over them and I take notes on what went well, like good conversations. So it's all there.
All right.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Good night.